Previously, on A Love That Lingered, Arthur marched off to war, leaving his family behind to carry the weight of his absence. Grace clung to his letters like lifelines. Oliver stepped into his stead to keep her company, and Lady Caldwell held her grief in silence. Life at the manor adjusted to a fragile normal, until Grace began to weaken from an unknown ailment. This is episode 26, The Quietest Secret. The manor had grown quieter in Arthur's absence, as if its very walls mourned with those who remained. The rooms that once carried his footsteps now echoed differently, emptier, colder. Grace, though determined to endure, found herself waking each day weaker than the one before. Her mornings began not with the lightness of routine, but with the heavy tide of nausea, and by mid-afternoon she could hardly keep her eyes open. Lady Caldwell noticed first. She was a woman of observation, having raised Arthur under the weight of grief after her husband's death. When she watched Grace pale over tea, her hands trembling, her appetite vanishing, she knew this was not the lingering melancholy of missing her son. Something was amiss. Oliver, too, had grown restless, his concern sharpened by helplessness. He had seen Grace try to dismiss her condition, smile past her weariness, and insist it was nothing but a passing illness. But her resilience only made his unease grow. He trailed her shadow, ever ready with a steadying arm or a softly spoken encouragement. Yet inside, he was unraveling, haunted by the thought of failing to protect her, as he had once failed to stop Arthur from leaving. By the time Lady Caldwell sent for the doctor, the manor's staff whispered among themselves, their worry carrying through the halls like a draft. Grace herself was too tired to argue when the physician arrived, though dread filled her heart at what he might reveal. The doctor, an older man who had tended the Caldwell family for years, examined Grace with quiet care. His expression softened as he sat across from her in the study, his words deliberate and steady. "You are not ill, Lady Caldwell. You are with child." The air in the room shifted. Relief, disbelief, and sudden tears mixing into silence. Grace pressed her hands to her stomach, stunned. For a fleeting moment, warmth and hope rose in her chest. But as quickly as it came, it was followed by fear. Arthur. He did not know. The news spread quietly through the manor's inner circle. Only Lady Caldwell, Oliver, and Grace knew the truth. The doctor was sworn to discretion, his loyalty bound to the family name. Grace's first reaction was a whispered apology, as though the child itself were a betrayal. "He has enough to carry already," she said, her voice breaking. "If I tell him, if he knows, he'll blame himself for not being here. He will feel it as another weight upon his shoulders." Oliver knelt at her side, the steadiness in his eyes belying the turmoil within. "My lady, this is Arthur's child, his joy as much as yours. Would you deny him that comfort while he fights in the mud and blood?" But Grace shook her head fiercely, almost desperately. "No, I cannot. If he knew, he would think of nothing else. He would march into battle with his mind on me instead of his sword. And if something were to happen to him because of it, I could never forgive myself." Ethel, who had been silent for much of the exchange, finally spoke. Her voice trembled with the weight of memory, of the losses she had already endured. Grace is right. Arthur has always been too ready to take the burdens of others as his own. To know he leaves behind not only his wife, but a child unborn, it may undo him. Oliver turned away, his jaw tight. He wanted to fight the decision to insist Arthur had a right to know. But deep inside, he too feared what the knowledge would do to his friend. His heart twisted between loyalty to Arthur and devotion to Grace. The days that followed were marked by secrecy. Grace adjusted to her condition as best she could, pacing her strength, resting when she needed. Lady Caldwell hovered with quiet diligence, her motherly instincts sharpening once more. Oliver, restless and anxious, filled every silence with companionship, offering her books, walks in the garden, or simple presence when she could not rise from her chair. Yet Oliver's restlessness often frayed into frustration. He would find himself staring at Arthur's empty chair in the study, or the training yard where they had once sparred, and his chest would ache with helplessness. One evening, unable to contain it, he confessed to Grace in a hushed, angry whisper, "I should have gone in his stead. I told him I would. I could have spared him this war, this danger. And now he does not even know he leaves behind an heir." Grace, pale and tired but steady in her gaze, reached for his hand. "Oliver, if you had gone, you would not be here now. And she swallowed, pressing his hand gently to her stomach, "I would be facing this alone. Do not think your place here is lesser. You are part of this child's safety. You are part of mine." His eyes burned, tears unshed. Her words did not erase his guilt, but they bound him to her more fiercely. He nodded silent and vowed to himself that he would not falter again. That night, Grace lay awake, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. The manor was quiet, the air heavy with both sorrow and hope. She thought of Arthur, his smile, his warmth, the way he had pressed his forehead to hers the night before he left. Would he even recognize the change in her when he returned? Would he ever return at all? She whispered into the dark, as though he might hear her across the distance, "Arthur, you are going to be a father." The confession filled the silence like a prayer. She felt the weight of her secret, both beautiful and unbearable. Her heart ached for him, and yet she remained steadfast in her decision. It was her act of love to carry this quietly, to shield him from the torment of guilt while he fought for survival. Oliver, pacing restlessly in the corridor outside her chamber, overheard the faint murmur of her voice. He stopped, pressing his palm against the door. For the first time, he allowed himself to cry. Silent, bitter tears for the man he loved as a brother, for the woman who bore his child in secret, and for himself, caught between them. Inside the room, Grace finally drifted to sleep, clutching hope as tightly as fear. The following morning dawned pale and gray, mist rolling over the manor grounds. Grace rose slowly, leaning on Oliver's steadying hand as they walked to the window. Beyond the fog, life at the estate continued, the stables alive with movement, the staff bustling quietly, unaware of the secret that had taken root in the family's heart. Lady Caldwell joined them, her presence regal yet weary, her hand resting briefly on Grace's shoulder. For a fleeting moment, the three of them stood together, united in silence by the unspoken truth. Then, a rider appeared at the distant edge of the estate, galloping hard toward the manor. The figure's urgency broke the morning calm, setting Oliver immediately on edge. He felt his chest tighten, fearing news from the front. Grace pressed her hand protectively to her stomach, her breath catching. She could not help but whisper the thought aloud, fragile as glass. "Is it news of Arthur?"